Excellent. So I'm very excited to be here. Just arranging my chat piece here now that everything has moved the minute I shared my screen. Um, so we're talking about empathy and emotional intelligence in the workplace, and I'm very excited to be here. And I feel that a good value out of any session is when it's not just me speaking, and when there is a lot of interactivity. So I'm going to be expecting to see a lot of things happening in the chat, and my eye is half always going to be on the chat. So please write stuff in, say stuff, because I think that that makes the conversation more richer. And by the way, can I just say you guys are amazing for joining on your Saturday evening. So I really appreciate it. And I hope I can live up to that entertainment expectation as well for a Saturday evening. So let's get started. Hang on one second. I'm just gonna, there we are. Let's get started. A little bit about me. Thank you, Sarah, for so generously introducing me and saying how much you love my sessions. I love being in sessions as well. So I think that I'm glad that that comes through. So my name is Farhana Dost Mohammed. I am coming in today from Toronto. I'm actually Tanzanian by birth, which is why I love still working with Africa and the different countries because I don't think Africa ever leaves your blood. You can leave the country, but it doesn't ever leave your blood, right? So I am the founder of the Unlock FD Learning Consulting. I have about 20, and I'm dating myself, about 20 plus years in learning and development. I've done all the different areas of learning and development, and but the thing that always that drove me into learning and development to start with was the whole point of I have a degree in psychology, so I always found that the way to help hone my skills in psychology and to be able to help others the best way in the corporate world was through learning and development. So here I am. I'm not going to go into more detail, but please feel free to find me on LinkedIn, connect, and let's have a conversation. All right, so that's a lot about me. I want to know about you now. So there's a theme here in your visuals. We will come to that. I'm keeping that a bit of a surprise until we get to it. But if you start noticing, so like, huh, why are we looking at these pictures? There is a reason for it. It wasn't just me waking up and deciding that I wanted to put these pictures in. But more on that later. So I would love to hear from you in the chat. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you've already said where you're from. Lagos, there's someone from Mauritius, but just tell me a little bit about yourself and what are you expecting to get from the session today? Why are you here? Give me some time because I'm assuming you're typing. But I really, really do follow the chat. So make sure you put your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your humorous anecdotes, whatever it is. So why are you here today? What do you hope to get out of the session? Broaden your knowledge. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I'm going to ask for forgiveness right up front if I mix up some names. I'm very good with the East African names. The West and the North African not so good. So please bear with me as we move on. Okay. And if you could say a little bit about what do you actually no, that's the next question. I won't jump the gun. Thank you. Anyone else typing in, or am I just sitting here waiting for nothing to come up? Perfect. Thank you, Mercy. One can't learn enough when it comes to emotional intelligence. We meet new people, work with them. Perfect. So you want to keep learning and keep reminding yourself. Yes, that is the biggest. I'm speaking to a bunch of L&D and HR people. You guys are on the ball. I'm here to understand how to better manage my emotions. Yep, that's a big one, right? I used to think I was very good at managing my emotions. Turned out that I was just ignoring them. I wasn't managing them. And then I learned. To get better at understanding what emotional intelligence is not. Oh, I like that one. And luckily, I do have some stuff about that. So we're good. We're covered. For me is to help identify gaps in my EQ. Perfect. And how to bridge them, learning different ways to be more empathetic. Yes. Um, and then into curriculum development, looking forward to learning something different from what you already know. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Now I know I'm talking to my learning folks because you're talking about learning, unlearning, and relearning and forgetting, right? Perfect. Thank you so much for those who have already started to put in the info. Keep it coming because I will keep looking at it still, but I'm going to move it in the interest of time. Otherwise, we'll be here for much, much longer. Okay. And one more here to learn how to increase my EQ. Yes, we're all working on that, aren't we? All right, let's move on. So I think a lot of you have already kind of sort of started talking about what you know about emotional intelligence. If there's anything else you would like to add, just add it now in chat because that was a question that was my next question is like, what do you already know, right? We live in a world today that no one is coming to the table blank. And you already have information or knowledge about things. And the learning gets richer when we acknowledge that up front and we bring it up so that I'm not always just talking about that the stuff that you already know. And then you're like, okay, I'm bored. I really don't want you to be bored in this next whatever time, 90 or less than 90 minutes that we have. So if you're writing something, that's great. Otherwise, I am going to move on because I think some folks have already started to say some stuff. But if you know already about emotional intelligence, what do you know? And I'd love to know that. If you could keep adding that in, that would be fantastic. Now we're going to try something interesting here. I'm going to try and open up my whiteboard. Good luck to me. Um, is this it? Aha. I think you should be able to see a little whiteboard, a palette on the side. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to select the stamp tool. So if you put your mouse over the thing that is under the pen, under the draw, it's a little check mark. That's the stamp tool. I'd like you to select that. You can choose whatever image that you like there. Maybe choose the star. Let's be stars today. Choose the star and then identify where you think you are on the emotional intelligence spectrum. Do you think you know, where are you? Do you feel as you go through your day, yeah, you know what? I'm fairly emotionally intelligent. I think I've got my act together. Where do you feel you fit on this spectrum? Do you need to do a lot of work on it, or do you think you're in a fantastic? Oh, amazing. I love this. Yes, this is great. Um, if someone has found the arrow key, it doesn't really matter what you use. I just want you to select something there. Anyone else? If you're having trouble, just give me put a note in the chat so I know. But we've got about 22 people or maybe 21 people, not including me. And I want to see some marks on this one. Yeah, good. Okay. Some of you found the draw tool. That is totally fine too. Everything that works. Perfect. I'll give you another 10, 15 seconds. If you're having trouble finding your tool, let me know. Right. That is a very interesting line. Ooh, someone found the star tool. Awesome. Amazing. Okay, I'll give you another 5 seconds and then we're going to move from here, okay? Actually, I might just take a screenshot of this. Sarah, can I ask you to take a screenshot of this? Because I'd love to come back to this one.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much. All right. Oh, is that one more person there? Okay, I am going to turn it off now because we're going to move. But thank you so much for putting your notes in here. Let me turn this off. And now the question is going to be, does it all come with me when I go to the next slide? Oh, yes, it does. Okay, let's just remove it first. Let me just clear it out. How do I clear this? There we go. Perfect. Okay, let's move on. not what I wanted to do. Okay. So I want you to take a few moments and read through these different scenarios and see if you can find any familiarity between these in these scenarios. And have you seen yourself do some of these things? And again, you know what? Let me just turn on the annotate tool again. And if you find that there is any one of these, or however many of these you read through and like, oh yeah, I've seen this happen, or oh yeah, I do this, or I've seen someone else do this, put a little check mark or a little tool, use the tool again to identify which ones you can relate to. First of all, are these like scenarios that sound reasonably realistic? Huh. Yeah. How many of us have avoided team members, right? When we just don't want to deal with it and we don't want to fight and we don't want to get angry. So we're just like, okay, every time I see you, I'm just going to run the other way. And number two, depending on the level of staff. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, that can be really frustrating, right? You're trying to explain something, and they can't keep up. I totally get it. And then we have someone who's selected, yes, staff getting delayed on something, but you're trying to manage yourself and say, wait a minute, is there something I can do to help rather than get angry, right? Yep. Yeah, number four is frustrating, isn't it? Oh, I'm seeing a lot of people on number five. That's very cool, very interesting. Okay. So as you're still reading and continuing through, I will just say that number one is an example of high EQ because you are in the moment, you are explaining something, and then you realize that you are getting off topic. And you come back and you check yourself and you continue. So that's a high EQ. Number two is more of an example of low EQ or a low emotional intelligence because you're getting annoyed with your coworker because they're not understanding. So you're getting that frustration, but actually there's a bit of self-awareness and and relationship management piece that needs to go in here to think about it. So we'll get into that. Number three is again an example of high EQ because what you're trying to do is trying to understand, wait a minute, before I just get really angry, can I figure out what's going on? Is it me or is it something I can do to help them to move this forward? Um, Number four, you're getting upset and you're just like you went straight to your boss or your boss's boss to say, look, this isn't working without actually getting into figuring out what's happening. So that's an example of low EQ. Number five, an example of low EQ. You're trying to do the right thing by avoiding a fight, but actually that may not be the best way to go about this one. And then number six, I think, um, that is absolutely an example of low EQ. So one of the reason why we did this right off the bat is so that you start realizing how emotional intelligence helps you or is woven into the very fabric of your day every day. And if we keep that in mind as we go through all the information that we're going to go through today, I think that that was going to be really, really helpful for you. And how did you manage to put that in there with the annotate tool going away? That was very interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you guys to stop now with that, and let's move on to, you know, I'm just giving you guys all kinds of stuff to do today. How are you feeling about that? This I'm actually going to ask you to put it on chat because it's probably going to be much faster to type in chat. So I'm going to ask you to type in chat, first of all, describing all the things that you can remember. Think of your manager or a leader who you really like and respect. What did you like and respect about them? What were the things that they did that you really liked and respected? So I'm just going to wait for you guys to write and think about that person. What were the things that they did that you really liked and respected? Okay, they coached you and they attempted to elevate your horizon, like broaden it and give you different perspectives. I'm making that assumption from that. Okay. What else? What did you really like about a leader or a manager in respect to what they did? And what is the thing that's stuck in your head or stays with you? Okay, carried the team along. Mm-hmm. Accessible, also rolled up their sleeves. They were there with you, right? Affirmed your capabilities. Yes, I think I was just thinking about that when I just started off. There was a manager who really believed in me and gave me some challenging stuff to do, and expected and knew that I would do it, and had more belief in me than I had in myself at that time. So yes, absolutely. Um, Ability to relate with each of the team members despite the differences. Yes, 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 absolutely. Because then they were looking at you individually, right? Try to understand my situation, asking how they could help, and genuinely helped when it was necessary. Love that. Proactive and resourceful. Regular constructive feedback. Yes, yes. But also, on that note, I would just say also feedback that actually helps, not harms, right? But that's a really good point. Okay, now let's flip it and think about a manager or a leader that you and others did not like. And what was it that you didn't like about them? Took honor, okay, just for the like and the respect, took ownership and responsibility for anything that didn't go well, regardless of who was at fault. Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Um, okay, so one more about like and respect, something that a manager that he didn't like, and he called you and he helped you to act, he gave you that awareness and helped you. That's perfect. That's a really good uh, perspective. So now maybe talk about things that about a leader or a manager that you didn't like. And I'm going to ask you to just put it in chat if you don't mind, because it's probably easier to do that. And I'm going to remove the points from here if you don't mind. Please don't feel bad. Uh, but I just want to be able to move on to the next one. Okay. Oh, someone's having lots of fun there. I'm going to close it up for you guys, please. If you could just not make any more points in here, that would be great. Thank you very much. Ooh, vengeful. That sounds really terrifying, actually. Imagine having a leader or a boss who is vengeful. My goodness, my goodness. Um, I didn't like when opinions of teammates were constantly being ignored. Absolutely. That's a really tough one, right? Got things done using their authority and not by their influence. And when it's like using a hammer instead of using something softer, right? Because you're literally whacking everyone into shape, which is not always going to leave them in good shape. Okay, gossip. Okay, yeah, that can be debilitating because there's no trust when there's gossip, right? Short circuit and thought about what works for them and for others in the organization, and disregarded organizational structure and system, but expected others to follow it. So do what I say, don't do what I do, right? False accusation. Wow, these are some tough things. That's really tough. That is really really tough. I will say that a lot of you might be in positions of leadership, and you might be at a point right now where uh you, whether you are formally or informally, you are leading. You are leaders in based on what it is that you do. And I think that it's really really important to keep in mind that as leaders, you set the temperature of the room. And emotional intelligence and empathy is one way, is the tools that you have to ensure that the temperature of the room that you're setting is comfortable, right? It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's comfortable. And I think if you keep that in your mind, you will really keep always adjusting yourself. Keep remembering that you set the temperature, and emotional intelligence helps you to consciously create the right temperature. So, a couple more things here. Some managers who are not hands on become oppressive instead of learning from their subordinates. They're also probably becoming very micromanaging, which can feel very a lot of pressure, right? Leaders who only get you only get the best out of when they perceive you to be in their corner. Oh, yeah, these are some very, very interesting things that you said. So we're now going to go and talk a little bit more in detail about emotional intelligence. But before we do that, what I'd like you to do, what I'd like to do is stop talking so that you can listen to a very, very quick but very informative video. So let's get into that.
If you're an aspiring leader or manager, there's an important element you need to consider when evaluating your knowledge and skills: emotional intelligence. Also known as emotional quotient, or EQ, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage your emotions and those of the people around you. Emotional intelligence is typically divided into 4 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Self-awareness is at emotional intelligence's core. It's your ability to not only understand your strengths and weaknesses, but recognize your emotions and how they affect you and your team. Self-management is your capacity to manage your emotions, particularly in stressful situations, and maintain a positive outlook despite setbacks. Social awareness is your aptitude for recognizing others' emotions and organizational dynamics. Those who excel in social awareness practice empathy. They strive to understand colleagues' feelings and perspectives so they can be better communicators and collaborators. Relationship management is your capability to resolve conflict and influence, coach, and mentor others. It requires both self and social awareness and channeling them into interactions. Building your emotional intelligence helps you grow as a leader and motivate and coach colleagues more effectively. In turn, you can advance your career and organization.
All right, what did you think of that? And were you aware of these 4 quadrants for emotional intelligence? So just very quickly, either give me a yes or a thumbs up. Were you aware of these 4 quadrants? And there is a reason why I ask is because that will, if most people know it, I'm not going to go into all the details. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we've got a good mix here. Okay, so there's a lot of information out there on emotional intelligence, okay? But if we distill all of it, it really is these main 4 quadrants. And I love this image because it helps you to really quickly identify the things that fall under self, the things that fall under others, because that's the first dichotomy. And then the second dichotomy is the awareness piece and then the action piece. So if you understanding yourself and your awareness, you're going to be into self-awareness quadrant. Under the understanding self and how to manage yourself falls into the action quadrant, and the same goes with the with for the others as well. So what we're going to do is just go into some of the. I'm going to just talk a little bit about each of these quadrants in a bit of detail, and hopefully this will just add on to what you've just heard, okay? So self awareness is really the knowledge of the self. It describes your ability to not only understand your strengths and weaknesses, but also recognize your emotions and their effect on you and your team's performance. Remember, I talked about the whole piece about the being leaders they set the temperature. When you are not aware of your emotions and the impact that they have on others, you don't know what temperature you're setting. And that's dangerous. You think of a leader, I'm sure, just maybe give me a hands up if you know of a leader who, the minute they walk into the room, everyone is very uncomfortable. All conversation stops. Everyone becomes quiet. Everyone's just worried. They're just a little scared because they don't know who's going to, be told off next or something terrible is going to happen. That leader is setting a certain temperature. Sometimes, many times, they're doing it without any conscious knowledge. They're not aware of the impact that they're having. Sometimes, some of them might be doing it on purpose, which is absolutely there. But I'm sure for many of these leaders, if you went to them and you gave them that reflection, they would be shocked. They would be like, oh my gosh, really? This is what I'm doing? So, so the self-awareness piece is really, really important. You know what's so funny? There's been organizational psychologists who did a whole bunch of research, and she found, her name was Tasha Eurich, Eurich, Tasha Eurich. So you can look her up and her work. But she found that 95% of people think that they're self-aware, but the reality is only 10 to 15% of people are actually self-aware. I'm going to let you sit with that for a bit, and I want you to write this down. 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of people are actually self-aware. And if you keep that as an awareness for yourself, you're going to start noticing a lot more things about your actions and the impact that it has not only on yourself and your emotions, but also other people's. Very important piece. And the thing is, if you flip the scenario a little bit, imagine if you're working with colleagues who are not self-aware. They're going to cut the team's success literally in half. And a lot of times, colleagues who are not self-aware cause a lot of stress. They cause decrease in motivation, right? Because you're constantly helping them or checking them, or leadership, you're looking to leadership to check on them and tell them that what they're doing is wrong. Sometimes leadership doesn't do anything about it. And so you're stuck in this position where you're like demotivated because you're like, what's the point if people who are not doing the right thing are not being told or not being corrected? Would you agree? Do you feel like that's ever happened to you or you've seen that in play? You know what? I'm sneaky like this. I will ask you questions from time to time because I want to see if you're paying attention, okay? I know it's Saturday. I know it's your evening, and you better know, well, if you are at a party and you're still joined on this thing, wow, thank you so much for your dedication. But I am going to put in these questions from time to time just to catch you to see if you're paying attention, okay? All right, cool. Feedback is solicited without application. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Absolutely. And it's frustrating as well, isn't it? Okay. So the more self-aware you are, the more in tune you're going to be with your emotional intelligence, and the easier you are going to make that transition from reaction to response. And that's why self-awareness is such an important piece. Because a lot of times, a lot of times when we're not aware of our reaction, our response, and now we're going into the self-management piece. It really affects our response. And a lot of times that response is going to make or break us in different situations, right? So because it's a nice segue into self-management, let's now talk about self-management. This refers to the ability to manage your emotions, especially in stressful situations. So it's one thing to know that, I'm aware or I'm not aware. Now, let's say I'm aware that I had a reaction to this situation. I have a trigger. Becoming aware of that is going to help me to take a step back, take a pause, take a deep breath, and then maybe react a little bit better to that situation than if I was completely not aware, right? How many of you have been in a situation where you were completely blindsided? Like someone came and told you something that you it just threw you completely. You're like, well, I didn't know this. And your reaction must have been pretty bad because it came out of left field. You didn't know what was happening. You've never been aware of it. So you had a pretty bad reaction. But if someone comes and talks to you about something that you have awareness of, even if it hurts you, or even if you don't like to hear what it is, you're not going to have such a bad reaction. You're going to be able to manage yourself better. And so that's why this whole piece of self-management is really important. Now, how can you still self-manage even if you're not self-aware of something? And it's a really simple technique. Some of you are probably already using it, but we might not be using it all the time or consciously. So if you're not, I think it's very simple. You just take a pause, take a deep breath, collect yourself, allow yourself the time to gather your thoughts. That's something that we don't give ourselves. And I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I will forget to give myself that time to gather my thoughts and think of how I want to react. I'll just react, right? And so this is where the self-management piece comes in. You could also, what are some other ways to manage your emotions? I've given you one, which is just to take a pause, take a deep breath, and just gather your thoughts. What other ways can you manage your emotions? Any ideas, any thoughts of what you do that's different? Yeah, so you take that pause and you're interpreting how you're feeling. Absolutely. Do any of you actually call a friend to talk to a friend or a sibling or someone who knows you well, or you play music? Yeah, because it gives you that distance, right? Okay, that's a great one. Anyone call a friend? Come on, people. You might be calling friends. You talk to your friends all the time, right? Or your sibling, or your mom, or your dad, depending on where they are, or your grandma, grandpa. I don't know. We play Sudoku. Really, Sudoku makes you manage your. I guess maybe it would just make me more stressed, and I would be a grumpy gremlin. But yeah, if that works for you, that is fantastic. You might even go for a walk, right? Did someone say that? Go. Yeah, there you go. My God, look at the timing. That was pretty good. Um, Perfect. All right. So all these things help you take a little bit of distance so that you can then react in a way that is going to be appropriate. So now let's go into the next quadrant, which is social awareness. Social awareness is knowledge of others, because while it's important for you to be able to manage and understand your emotions, you need to know how to read the room, right? And this is where social awareness becomes really important as a quadrant, because it's your ability to recognize other people's emotions and also the dynamics in play in your organization. If you've come across people who are completely clueless, you will notice that they are going to be like saying things or doing things at a time where their timing is just a little bit off, or it's a lot off, and then it becomes very awkward. Um, so just to keep that in mind, I think that that's really important. Okay, we're at the halftime mark. Just so you know where we're at with timing, but I think we're doing well. And then the final one is relationship management. And relationship management, this is really important because actually I'll go back to social awareness one more step to think about from a social awareness. This is where empathy sits. Okay. And empathy is ranked as the number one leadership skill. And there is research that shows that leaders who master empathy perform 40% higher in coaching, engaging others, and decision making. So that when under social awareness, that's what you're trying to reach. You're trying to perfect that. But we'll talk a little bit more about empathy, because that's a really important conversation, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So I want to talk about that. So yeah, I'm not going to talk too much yet because there's a few slides after that I'm going to go into for that. Now let's move on to then relationship management, which is the last quadrant. And relationship management refers to your ability to influence, coach, and mentor others and resolve conflicts easily. A lot of times we prefer to avoid conflict, but it's important to address it properly. Because if you don't, then what happens is it bubbles up, and then goes boom, right? And I'm sure we've all seen that happen in different places in our workplace or in our personal lives as well. So, and research actually shows that unaddressed conflict can waste about 8 hours of company time in the gossip and other unproductive activities. And it puts a drain on resources, it puts a drain on morale. So, if you have a team that you're leading and you want them to be happy and you want to move things along, you want to do well as a team, then having tough conversations is actually a really important thing to do. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper. How do you feel? I've been talking a lot. I'm just going to take a quick check. How do you feel about this? Does this make sense? Is this interesting? Is this stuff you've already you're like, yeah, okay, I'm bored now? Yeah, interesting. I hope that's the yep for. Okay, perfect. Amazing. Okay. Perfect. I mean, you can, if you're bored, tell me because then I can shift my directions and my focus. Okay, awesome. Perfect. Glad to hear that. Okay. We're just going to take one step deeper now into those 4 quadrants, okay? And look at these sections in just a little more depth. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, and I want you to pay attention, okay? Because your next activity, this is going to be important for you. So just telling you, just putting it out there. Okay. So let's go a little bit deeper into each of these quadrants, talking about self-awareness. So this is when you know your internal state, your preferences, and what resources you have, right? And emotional self-awareness is the biggest bucket in this category. And this is the capacity to understand how our feelings affect us, because we forget about that, right? We take our feelings for granted. So sometimes if you're feeling a certain thing, you're just going to say, look, I'm feeling angry. But what we don't realize sometimes, if we dig a little deeper, we'll realize that this feeling of angry or anger has an effect on us. So we want to be able to understand what these feelings that we're feeling are doing to us. But on the other hand, these feelings also affect other people. And these feelings also affect our job performance. So you really want to be able to pay attention to your emotional state and be aware of it. Know what you're doing. I'll give you a really simple example, okay? This might be something that that maybe one of you has experienced as well. So I told you I was born in Tanzania, right? And so there was a thing in my family. Actually, I'm gonna fast forward first and then come back to this. When I had my child, my first child, I have 2. Anytime she would drop her glass of milk on the table or on the floor or anything, I would lose my mind. I would be normal 1 minute and I would be a raging beast in another minute. Not even a minute, in like a few seconds. And it used to just be like Jekyll and Hyde almost. And it was only something like it wasn't a big thing. She was just dropping her milk or dropping water. And I would get so angry to the point that she, poor girl, was traumatized about dropping. And she was only like maybe 2 years old. And my husband said one day, why do you get so angry when she's just dropping water or dropping some milk? And it took me aback because I didn't realize that I was getting so angry. And so the first piece, just that awareness that I'm getting unreasonably angry on such a small thing, helped me to cut that behavior out. And when I did that, I realized the impact I was having on my poor baby. And then I dig deeper and I was thinking, why do I do this? Why do I get so angry? What is this that I'm getting angry about? And then I realized that this was a learned behavior. This was a behavior that I got from my father. And I forgot that when I was little and my siblings were little, if we dropped water or any liquid at the table, at the dinner table, he would get so angry and we would be told to go and sit in the kitchen and eat our food in the kitchen. And he must have learned it from his father. But I had this lack of self-awareness when it came to this one behavior. Now, the reason why I tell you this is because it was a very personal thing. It had nothing to do with work, but it had an impact, and it had an impact on something that was so important to me. So I want you guys to think about your behaviors, and especially those highly charged emotional reactions that you have to certain things, and start digging a little bit. Become aware of what you do and the impact it has on others, and you will start to unravel things and learn things about yourself that you never would have imagined before. Is this resonating? Does it make sense? Just going to check time to make sure that we have enough time to do everything that we need to. Okay. Perfect. And if you have, as you're thinking about this, if something pops up in your head and you realize, please feel free to share it as well, because I think that these are insights that help other people as well, right? Okay, so that's the piece on under self-awareness. I'll go into self-management now. So under self-management, you are looking at emotional self-control, and this is where this is your ability to keep disruptive emotions or impulses in check, such as anxiety, anger, and this is even in stressful or hostile environments. So emotional self-control it's not about suppressing your emotions. We're not talking about that, but it's about understanding the function and using your emotions as a guidance system to help you understand what's going on. So sometimes you walk into whatever situation. I'm not going to say work or personal, but you know, there's a group of people who you know, and they're having a great time. They're laughing, they're joking. You walk up to the table and you sit down, and everyone just becomes quiet. So you're going to have an emotional reaction to this because it's a bit threatening, right? Or it's confusing. But at that point in time, that's a good time to keep your emotions in check. Not suppress them, but in check. And this is a time when you evaluate, and then maybe you can ask, hey, what's going on? Or you can later ask somebody, say, what happened there? Was it because of me, or did something just happen? And it was just a natural, lull in the conversation where the conversation that you were talking about was finished and I just happened to come at that time? Or was it something that is related to me? Were you guys laughing at me? So this is a great example of self-management. Another one is adaptability, ability to change and handle change and be flexible. And the world that we're living in today, that's going to be the most important thing that is out there, right? Achievement orientation and positive outlook also fall under self-management. And achievement orientation is when you're striving to meet or exceed a standard, and looking for ways to do things better. And positive outlook is about looking at the positive in people and situations and events despite setbacks and obstacles. I've spoken a lot. Any questions? You guys following with me? You're good? Yes, I'm assuming you're following with me.
Yes, we are actually following with you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So the next piece then is under social awareness. And social awareness is got the empathy piece and organizational awareness. So with empathy, that's when you have awareness of other people's feelings, needs, and concerns. And empathy, really focuses on understanding others. And as it turns into what you do in the workplace, it's how much time you spend developing others, bolstering their abilities, that service orientation, the ability to anticipate, recognize, and meet others' needs. And then the diversity piece, making sure that you are, as a leader, cultivating opportunities through diverse people. And we'll talk about empathy in more detail. So we haven't stopped talking about empathy yet. We'll come back to it. And then the next one is organizational awareness. And this is the ability to read the group's emotional currents and the power relationships. And the better you get at this, the better you will be doing at work. A lot of times we think that if we do really, really well and we're academically brilliant, we will go very far. But how many of us have seen academically brilliant people who've been put into a room and said, okay, you sit in here and do your brilliant work. Don't come out. We're not going to expose you to people because we just need your brain. Right? So if you really want to move forward, you need to go beyond that and you need to get into that space where you can start reading the room, where you can understand what's happening and navigate all the things that are happening. You know, for many years, I worked at KPMG International. And one of the things I learned there was that your knowledge and your skills were table stakes. They expected you to already be at the top of your game. What kept you in that company was the ability to navigate the political stuff, was your ability to read the room, was your ability to be aware of the emotions and the things that were not being said in a meeting or in a group or in a situation. And that's where that organizational awareness comes in. And it's so, so important if you are someone who's looking to grow and looking to move. And then finally, let's get into relationship management. This is really talking about the how you manage your relationship with others. And so you got influence, which is the capacity to have a positive influence and impact on others, because you want, that's very important because you want to be able to gain support and buy-in from key people. You also, if as a leader, if you don't have the influence, it's going to be really hard for you to build followership and get people to be inspired by you and follow you. And then coaching and mentoring, I think we talk about that a lot in general, but it's the ability to help from an emotional intelligence perspective, is the ability to help others through emotional or tense situations, tactfully bringing disagreements into the open, but in a way that helps to fix things as opposed to make the problems bigger. Conflict management, and then teamwork, the ability to work together as a team towards a shared goal. And then finally, the inspirational leadership, which is the ability to give people a sense of purpose beyond their day-to-day task. So, so, so important. Because inspirational leaders inspire and motivate their people towards a shared mission. When you feel like you're part of something bigger than just your steps of what you're doing every day, automatically you feel better, you feel healthier, you feel more aligned, you want to come into work. And these are the things that as a leader, and as someone who has a high emotional intelligence, this is a thing that's going to really show up. So now, I want to now that we've gone into a whole bunch of detail about this and I've filled your brain with a lot of information, let's put some of this knowledge to use, okay? So, question that I have as we get into the next activity is, can show of hands or just say yes or no in chat, how many of you are familiar with the movie Black Panther? Or rather, maybe I should ask, how many of you are not familiar? Is there anyone here who's not familiar? Yes, Wakanda forever. Okay, perfect. Okay. So what we're going to do is, for those who are not familiar, I'm just going to give you a moment to read this information about about Black Panther. And you might be like, why did we go from talking about emotional intelligence to Black Panther? Where is this connection coming from? What the heck is going on? So what I'm going to do is we're gonna use what we've learned in the last little while to think about how emotional intelligence shows up or doesn't show up in different people. And it's really hard when we have a bunch of people from different organizations. And even if you were from the same organization, to talk about each other in this kind of setting is really, really uncomfortable, right? So rather we choose something that we're all comfortable or familiar with and use those characters. So we're choosing Black Panther because it's a really cool movie, one that I like, and it's got so many different nuances of characters that I felt like this would be something that would be fun to explore. So over the next little while, what we're going to do is we are going to look at a few of the main characters from Black Panther, and we're going to think about what are their strengths or their weaknesses from an emotionally intelligence perspective. Got it? Are you with me? Yes? No? Let's do the first one together. And it's a bit of a cheat because this is the easy one, right? All right. So let's do the first one. So this is Black Panther himself. And I might mess up the names, but that's okay. But it's T'Challa, I think. He is the king of Wakanda, right? So thinking of T'Challa's character, which was played brilliantly, what do you think are his emotional intelligence strengths? What do you think from a strengths perspective of emotional intelligence? And if you think about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, if you think about all the stuff we've talked about, what do you think were some of his strengths? Yes, he was always calm. He was very composed, right? Even when he was in a difficult situation or it was being challenged. So absolutely. Anything else that you can think of from emotional intelligence quotient? Yes. He had a high empathy, right? Very, very high empathy. And I think that one of the things that showed up was that he was deeply aware of his responsibilities and of his role as a king, right? He was very cool, calm, and collected. Absolutely. Do you think that he showed a deep understanding of people's needs? I think he did. Even his own enemies, like he was quick to forgive because he could understand, he could empathize with them, right? That's a great one. Yeah, perfect. What do you think were some of his weaknesses? You think he was sometimes too calm and composed? And he was too rational with his thinking to try and balance everything? Would you agree? Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I think sometimes it was too much balance, right? And so it wasn't helping the situations, some situations. In most situations it was great, but in some situations it actually wasn't because it wasn't clear where he was going sometimes. All right, perfect. Now you know what we're doing. Here's something that maybe he would have said. What do you think? True leadership comes not just from physical powers, but from the ability to understand and manage one's own emotions and those of others. Perfect. Let's look at Shuri. You remember Shuri? Little firecracker that she was? She was great, wasn't she? What do you think were her strengths from a emotional intelligence perspective? If you think about her, you think how she came across, what were her strengths? Her social skills? Yeah. She was a genius. Yeah, yeah. She was very confident, right? And she was very aware of her abilities, right? She had a very high IQ and she was aware of her abilities and she knew and she wouldn't let anyone put her down or she wouldn't get feel disrespected or not confident just because someone didn't understand what she was doing, right? Or where she was going. Absolutely. What do you think her weaknesses were? Ah, yes, a long time. Some people are saying it's been a long time since you saw the movie. I totally get it. Um, but if you think about Shuri, um, her impatience, because she was so confident and she had such a high IQ and she was so smart, sometimes she was very impatient with people who didn't understand what she was saying, right? And it would come across in her body language or in her facial expressions, the eye rolls or the walking away, the impulsiveness. Absolutely. So her intelligence was actually causing her to sometimes just like disregard what people said. Sometimes it was a good thing, sometimes it wasn't such a good thing. All right, let's move on. You remember Okoye? Okoye was a pillar of strength, right? What do you think some of her key strengths were from an emotional intelligence perspective? Remember, she was a warrior, one of the elite warriors, right? Yes, strength and sense of responsibility. Absolutely. I think one of the key things that showed up from hers was the ability to maintain emotional control, right? Like she was probably emotional control personified, right? Loyalty as well. And she was able to navigate the complex loyalties in a way that balanced her duties to the throne and her personal beliefs. She did a great job of it. But where do you think her weaknesses came? Do you think that sometimes because of her strong sense of duty and loyalty, she became too rigid or inflexible? Yeah, she didn't know where to be soft and she didn't know where to be flexible, right? Because if you remember the villain, Killmonger, she when he becomes king, even though he is being unjust, she was struggling with the idea of rebelling against him because of that rigidity and flexibility, right? Exactly. Her loyalty was also her weakness. Absolutely. So I'm just in the interest of time, there's a few more, but I'm just going to go to the last one, who is Killmonger. If you're enjoying this thing, that's great. Um, Maybe we can think about how to redo this, but with a little bit more time. So Killmonger was the villain here, right? Although I think that the movie did a great job in showing all his shades, good and bad. And he had a personal vendetta against the king and against Wakanda. So I would say that even with him, you could see strengths and weaknesses in his emotional intelligence. Let's start with the weaknesses. What do you think was his greatest weakness from an emotional intelligence perspective? So remember, he had a lot of pain and trauma, right? From his past. Yes, he was very, very angry, and he had a lot of pain. And so all he could think of, exactly, that empathy was missing, because all he could think of was his revenge rather than reconciliation. He couldn't think beyond what had happened to him and his family, and that's all he could focus on. And because of that, he wasn't able to manage his emotions, and he wasn't able to manage the destructive pieces of his emotions which caused the destructive behavior. And coming back to the empathy piece, if someone did not share his view, he didn't take the time to understand them. So that's very interesting. Although I will say that he does have a bit of, he did show some strengths, which was maybe the understanding of his strength was that he had an understanding of where his emotions and motivations were coming from. Despite being wrong and despite not wanting to change, he still was like, doesn't matter. This is where I'm coming from. This is where I'm at. So from a self-awareness perspective, he was very, very self-aware. Yeah. And also, to some point, I don't know about you, but at one point I was almost hoping they would become friends because you kind of liked both of them and you wanted them to both reconcile. But okay. So what insights did you gain from this activity? How was this activity to understand more about emotional intelligence? Could you recognize similar strengths and weaknesses in yourself and in people in the workplace or in people in your lives? Can you see that little struggle that we seem to have? Because The reality is that everyone has strengths and weaknesses with their emotional intelligence. And we go to that whole concept of the temperature. I think it's safe to say that there's many times where you might be more self-aware in some situations and less self-aware in other situations, right? So if you're in a place where you are comfortable and you know your awareness, you know your surroundings, you know the people, you kind of know what to expect, you're going to be more self-aware because you are less worried about what else is going on or threats in the environment. When you're in a place where it's new or it's a bit hostile, or the people don't like you very much, or you really stand out, you stick out because you look different, or you're saying things that are very different from what everyone else is saying, that's a time when you might become less self-aware actually, because all your fears and your anxieties are all coming to the surface and they're kind of consuming you. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind, and use that as a way to help guide you out of those situations in a good way. Very, very good point. Your strengths can also turn into weaknesses. Overdeveloped strengths can absolutely become your weaknesses. So you really want to keep that in mind. And that comes to the realization that because everyone has the different shades of strengths and weaknesses, you not being aware of where you're coming from can make you come across as a bad guy sometimes, even if there was no intention on your part to become the bad guy. And I think that's a really important piece, because there's a lot of leaders out there who are very confused and very hurt by their teams. Because they're saying, well, I'm doing so much for my teams. I work weekends for my teams. I work to make sure everyone's doing good. Why does my team not like me? What am I doing, or what are they doing? Why can't they understand what I'm doing for them? Lack of self-awareness. You don't understand what's going on. Okay. The other piece is that emotional intelligence is not just for leaders, it's for everybody, right? It's necessary for outstanding performance at work, whether you're a leader or employee, sorry. And actually, employees with higher emotional intelligence are more likely to stay calm under pressure, resolve conflicts easily, respond to coworkers with empathy, and have a higher potential of growing and moving beyond their role to leadership roles. Okay. Any insights that you gained about yourself during this exercise? What insights did you gain about yourself? Anything that you're like, okay, I didn't know I did this. Actually, I moved a bit too fast there. Anything you learned about yourself today? That's a good one. Yeah, I agree. For myself as well. We need to constantly be improving our social awareness. Absolutely. All right. We're just going to move on in the interest of time. I noticed that we're coming down to time. I know we talk about empathy a lot. Everyone talks about empathy, but how many of us actually show empathy in action? And what does the workplace look like without empathy? Let me show you something quickly. When empathy is missing in the workplace, this is an example of how it could come across, where you ignore personal issues, for example. So think about a time when a boss knew that one of her staff had an elderly mother who was sick, but they refused to change the time of a staff meeting just because they're like, no, we can't do that. I mean, I'm sure there's different variations of this, but this is a great example of empathy missing in the workplace. Another one is when you find that leadership or your boss is dismissing your concerns about a new policy maybe and what the impact is going to be on the team. But the manager says, yeah, it's not going to be a problem. Believe me, I figured it out. We're going to be good. And there's no acknowledgement of the impact to the team. Has that ever happened? Just quickly maybe say yes or no to as I go through. There's two more. So for the first one, for both of these actually, do these feel familiar? Have you come across these situations? Yeah. No to the first one and yes to the second one. Okay, good. And you know, a lot of times the boss might have been thinking, you know what, I know you have a problem, but I also need to think about other people in the team. So they have a good reason, but it's how it comes across that could also be a lack of empathy as well, right? Okay, the next two are lack of recognition. That's something that I'm sure people have felt because you know, everyone works hard towards the timeline, but there's no acknowledgement. Or there's insensitive comments that are being made or inappropriate jokes that are being made about somebody, and nobody says anything, and the behavior doesn't get addressed either. These are all examples of empathy missing in the workplace. So what is empathy? Let's go back again to just refresh our memory. Empathy is really the ability to feel other people's feelings, to understand their perspectives, and to sense what they need. So you're literally looking through their eyes to see the world, right? And so when empathy is done really well, it allows someone to share feelings experienced by that other person and respond to them as if they are experiencing the same feeling. And in fact, there's a lot of research on the brain that says that we have mirror neurons. Exactly, putting yourself in others' shoes. And these mirror neurons that we have in our heads are actually, they mirror the other person that we're talking to. Sometimes you'll notice you're talking to somebody and suddenly you're sitting like them. And you didn't do it on purpose, but you are mirroring their posture. You're mirroring their hand gesture, positioning, and all of that. That is your bodies are talking and getting alignment there. But the mirror neurons also, like if you see something that is a very sad thing that has happened to someone, and you know, if tears are flowing from your eyes, and you really feel that, oh my God, I can see myself in this situation, and what would I have done if I was there? That's empathy, right? And they're more than this is more than just a buzzword. It's a critical skill that can change the way that you connect with others, the way you work, and actually the way you live your life, because it impacts everything. And a lot of times people find empathy very, very difficult because they know that this is important for themselves, but it can put a lot of burden. Now, before I go into this, I want to be clear about the distinction between empathy and sympathy. Okay? Because empathy and sympathy are two different things. And this is a really important graph. There's one beyond sympathy as well. So if you're feeling pity for someone, you're feeling sorry for them. If you feel sympathy, you're saying, "Listen, that's terrible. I really feel for you." Okay? But when you're feeling empathy, you're not feeling for that person, you're feeling with them. You can actually feel that. That problem becomes your problem. It starts to weigh you down. And for leaders, this is where the problem comes in, is that if you start to take in everybody, or even people who are very empathetic, if you start to take on the problems of every single person and start feeling those problems as if they're your problems, you're going to be paralyzed. You won't be able to do anything. You'll just be feeling miserable the whole time, right? And this is why a lot of people start getting burnt out at work. So, especially if you're a leader and you have to feel empathy for a lot of people, what the heck are you going to do? And this is where the whole concept of compassion comes in. And compassion is something that goes beyond empathy and sympathy. This is where you are, you might feel that connection, but you're taking a step back and saying, okay, I'm here to help you. How can I help you? And this is where, if you're most effective as a leader, this is where you're going to sit. Now, we have a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is going to do a little activity to help you to understand the distinction between empathy and compassion. Okay, are you guys ready? Okay, so let me know if you're sitting in a comfortable space, because we're going to do a little bit of we're going to immerse ourselves into this activity, okay? So I want you to sit comfortably, and I want you to close your eyes. Okay, relax your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Relax the little muscles at the corners of your eyes. Just let everything go. Just relax. Now think of a person you really care about who's experienced some kind of difficulty or hardship or suffering, either emotionally or physically. Anybody, it can be anyone. Think of someone who you know and you care about them and they've been going through a tough time. Now imagine this person sitting right in front of you. I want you to notice how their suffering is showing in their face, maybe even in their body language. They look sad, shoulders a bit drooped, got worry in their eyes. Watch them trying to deal with it. Just take a moment and just look at this person that you're now imagining. See how they're dealing with their tough situation. By now, you might be feeling a sense of heaviness or sadness yourself. Right? This is the experience of empathy. It's good. It means you care. But at this point, you can't do anything to help them, right? Because you are also immersed in their feelings. You're feeling the same thing, and you can start feeling helpless if you stay there for too long. And to really help them, you need compassion. So now I want you to imagine you're taking a few mental steps away from this person to get some perspective. And then ask yourself, how may I be able to help this person? What small thing or big thing can I do to make them feel better? Maybe you can give them a call, send them a text, go visit them, ask someone to check up on them, send them a gift. What can you do, small or big, that will help them to make them feel better? Now, I want you to make a strong commitment to do at least one thing to help this person that you've imagined or you've thought of. It has to be a real person. Sit with this commitment for a few moments. What are you going to do to help them? I want you to recognize that you are now in a position, even in a tiny way, to make a difference for this person. How do you feel now? Slightly lighter, right? A little bit better, right? This is the experience of compassion. And this is a great way for you to get out of the empathy hijack. So gently open your eyes, back in the room with me. Remember your commitment to help this person. And let's just quickly wrap this up to say, talk about the empathy hijack. Because when you are too empathetic, you can get hijacked by all those feelings. And so what you want to do is you want to connect with empathy, but you want to lead with compassion. So you need the empathy to forge that connection, but you can't stay there only with the empathy. You got to move forward and lead with compassion. So the minute you take a few steps away, you get a better perspective. How do you feel? How was that exercise? Was that helpful in understanding the distinction between empathy and compassion? Yeah, how do you handle a boss in the office that's always bullying? That's a really, you send them to my workshop. How about that? I'll put them straight. No, I'm just joking. But that is something that I think that is very important to think about from you want to dig into the relationship management piece. You want to dig into the social awareness piece. You also want to dig into your self-awareness piece there. And that's also very important. Now, unfortunately, with the 2 minutes that we have left, I can't answer that question in the depth that I would love to, but if that is something you are dealing with today and you really having a hard time, then absolutely we can have a follow-up conversation on that. So as we're coming up closer to your time, and I don't want to take away any additional time on your weekend, I really appreciate you being here, all of you really interacting and joining in. I want to leave you with a really cool tool to help you with your emotional intelligence. It's a tool that you can practice to build your emotional intelligence. And remember, your empathy comes in here as well. First, it's just remember the acronym RULER. You're going to use the ruler in a good way, okay? Not to smack people. You're going to recognize your emotion first. Then you're going to understand what caused it. Once you've understood what caused it, then you label your feeling. You express how you feel, and then you regulate your emotion. So let's go back to that example that I told you about my daughter, right? When I used to lose my mind when she used to drop stuff. So first, when I realized that, I started to understand what was happening in my head. The recognizing my emotions was to understand, okay, I'm getting really angry, but I'm not actually angry about the thing dropping. The anger is coming from the back. It's a learned behavior. What's causing it? I had to dig in to figure out, okay, it's causing it because that's something that's so subconscious that I saw my parent do. And it's something that I've taken with me. What a silly thing to take with me. By the way, the minute I recognized it, it disappeared. That was crazy. And then once I started to label it, I realized that I was actually not feeling angry anymore, which is very, very strange. So maybe that's not a perfect example, but if you use this, I think you will start to have a little bit of a roadmap to manage your feelings and to also build your emotional intelligence. And with that, I'm going to stop today. I really appreciate your time. I'm more than happy to spend another few minutes here if you have any questions. And I think the slides are going to come to you, but let's do this one last activity. Remember I asked you up front, I asked you, where did you think, how emotionally intelligent did you think you were? And you guys all put a little bit of a check mark somewhere. So now after having this conversation, where do you think you are now on this spectrum? So remember, take your tool and just make a note or a line or a stamp or something. Okay, lovely. I see there's a little bit of a shift. Some people have shifted further to the right. Some people have shifted further to the left. That's fantastic. I love that. And be honest. I can't see who, even if I can, if this isn't, nobody's judging you. Be honest about where you were at. Where did you think you were? And where do you now think you were? Perfect. Okie dokie. Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate the time that you have spent. I'm just going to clear this out if you don't mind. I know some people might still be trying to do it, but just to let you know that I will come back to questions, but just to let you know that in the slide, there's a little bit about some of the other workshops that I run. I run them online and I also run them in person. Take a look at them. If you have any questions about any of them, please feel free to reach out and ask. And let's come back to this. Are there any questions before we wrap up today?